Author of Strength of the Oak, Strength of the Willow: How to Find Courage and Compassion in a Turbulent World, Andrew Anderson shares how he went from broke, divorced, and living in his parents' basement at the age of 30 to transforming his life and hundreds of others with neuro-linguistic programming. Here to share the proven tools that helped him and the hundreds of clients he has coached and served find the courage and compassion to pick up the broken pieces and create a life they love. Welcome, best-selling author Andrew Anderson. Welcome to the podcast. It is such an honor to have you,
Yes,
especially after multiple attempts and fails on my end, thanks to sick kids and
it's
fill
okay.
in the blank.
That's what happens.
I did enjoy reading your book. I'm excited to dive into multiple points and kind of take the listeners on a journey, and those of you watching via YouTube. But I want to press the rewind button a little bit. I'm reading here from the book. I remember you mentioned that at 30 years old, you were ultimately, to summarize it quickly, the Cliff Notes version. At 30 years old, ultimately broke, divorced, living in your parents' basement.
Mhm.
So let's chat a little bit about, where you were and how that helped launch you to where you are now. And also, side note, there's no judgment for living in your parents' basement. My husband and I lived in my parents' basement twice since we've
Yeah,
been
same.
married for different reasons, but many of us have lived in our parents' basement. But share
Yeah,
with us a little bit your backstory.
yeah, absolutely. Um, so 10 years ago, we were going in the fall of 2013. I was at the top of my game. I'd been teaching for 6 years. I loved spending each day with teenage kids that were just super humble and changing their lives and full of energy and hope. And we were in year number 7 of marriage, and we had baby girl number 3 on the way. I had finished my master's degree. And so within the matter of a month, we moved back to our hometown of Boise, Idaho. I finished my master's. I got placed in a new school, and we had our little girl. And my wife, in this matter of all of these things happening in that same month, said that she wanted to separate. And it just destroyed me. I mean, we talk about dark night of the soul. This was it for me. And I believe that I had failed her, and I had failed those 3 little girls. And ultimately, I believe that I had failed God. And I didn't see how any of this could be redeemed. And that's where chapter 1 of my book starts. And that's my 10 years ago. That's the story where I was at.
What were you teaching?
I was
What
teaching.
were you? You were a teacher.
Yeah. So I was teaching religious education. We did scripture
Okay.
study classes with
Hmm.
teenagers. So we're taking principles from scripture and applying it to their lives and seeing
Hmm.
if they can actually become, converted and actually have these things change who they were and how they were showing up.
Hmm. Something I love that you mentioned is the idea of you feel like you failed.
Yeah.
And it's this really humbling moment I think many of us have been through
Right.
where it's, I shouldn't speak for yourself, but for me, it's amazing how quickly that sense of failure, when you really unravel and peel back the layers, it actually ends up ironically being steeped in pride because
Mm.
it's like you think you should be able to do everything perfectly and do it really, really well. And then when it all falls apart, you're like, woe is me. And in
Mhm.
the end, it's really, uh, maybe for too long, I haven't been humbly relying
Yeah.
on the Lord to be my source of strength. And in reality, I have failed, but it's actually because I have been thinking too much of myself. And that
Exactly.
might
And
be my
it's
experience, not yours, but I love how you pulled that in really quickly.
I think that's pretty universal. You're not the only one. And I think that's why the story in the book resonates with so many people is because we've all been in that place of, I call it unconscious incompetence, not knowing what we don't
Mm,
know about
hmm.
ourselves. And when it comes to pride, we can either choose to be humbled because we're aware of our incompetence and our struggle, our sin, whatever that is. And so we
Hmm.
can either choose to be humble or we can be compelled. And for me, and for so many, I think we're more often than not compelled to be humble because we don't have the awareness to make the choice. So my goal as a coach and when I speak is to bring awareness, to give people an opportunity to make a choice so they don't have to feel compelled due to life circumstances like I was.
Yeah. What? For somebody who is listening and, whether they are already at that point,
Yeah.
perhaps, I'm reading a line that you mentioned on your website: depression, anxiety, rage, confusion, loneliness, you name it. I felt it. For those of you listening and watching, maybe you're there now. That
Mhm.
line resonates with you right now. You're already sort of at that dark moment, if you will. But for a lot of people, they might be on the earlier end. They might
Yeah.
not be there yet. And certainly this book would be a great read for you. But
Mhm.
for somebody who feels like they are walking that direction, if you could have spoken to yourself at year 3 of that marriage, for
Yeah.
example, the first one, to that listener and the watcher who might be at that point, what advice would you give them for your own experience to help maybe intervene so that they're not at that dark moment based on your own experience? And obviously hindsight vision is,
Yeah.
we don't live looking backward, but we learn from it. And that's kind of the moment we're taking advantage of here.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I've heard it said that those who don't learn from the past are doomed to repeat it. And so I have no
Amen.
problem looking back to learn more and share my learnings with others.
Yeah.
And what I would say to that version of myself or to anyone else that doesn't know maybe the
Yeah.
direction they're going is we all hold limiting beliefs about ourself and our identity and our role in this world and in God's plan. Like we all hold beliefs, deep, deep, deep beliefs and emotions that are tied to those beliefs that aren't serving us.
Mm.
And I would just ask, would you be open to exploring something that may be suppressed beneath the surface that you might not have ever considered before?
Mm-hmm.
And that takes a lot of courage and
Mm-hmm.
vulnerability for sure. So, and that's what I do in my book.
Yeah.
I ask some of those powerful questions to the reader, and I ask them to my clients. Can I go somewhere that maybe no one else has ever gone with you?
Mm-hmm. It's the challenge for all of us. Are you willing to get comfortable with being uncomfortable
Right.
and allowing yourself to settle there for a little bit, which it does take a lot of courage. It's really, really hard.
So
Um,
once we get permission, right? And if that person says
yeah,
yes, then I would say, okay, let's be 100% honest. And let's
mm,
look at 6 areas in what I call, your will of life. And, this will of life really encompasses most things. And I, share it in my book and I share it with each of my clients. But when it comes to your career, when it comes to the relationship, that matters most in your life, there it is.
mm.
When it
It's
comes
page
to
51 of the book, I think.
that, oh man,
See? Look at that. Look at that.
you are so
On it.
prepared. You are on it. Yes. Let's verify. Yep, page 51. You got it. So when it comes to these areas, whether it's your fitness and nutrition or your personal growth and
Yeah.
development, your spirituality, or these 6 core areas, on a scale of 1 to 10, how fulfilled are you honestly?
Yeah.
And if you're not,
Yeah.
if you're not an 8, 9, or a 10, then how long will you be okay, like just being complacent at a 7 or a 6 or a 5?
Yeah.
And if that continues, right? In a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what will be the impact of staying in that place of complacency? That's where I would
Yeah.
take.
And he just rolled right into that. And I love it because that was one of the things that I wanted to lead into. What I enjoyed, to me, there was, again, this is Anna's Cliff Notes version,
Yeah,
because in order to get the entire story, you need to buy the book. But
right.
what I liked is even before that Wheel of Life, I think, for people listening and watching, you brought up a really poignant challenge, and it was this concept of creating a life mission statement to give you clarity. And
Mhm.
here's the thing, you guys listening, some of you are like, oh my gosh, heard that a million times, but have you done anything about it? This is the challenge for us, is this concept of, what do we actually want to be said at our funeral? We don't like to think about it, but it's like, until you really ask those uncomfortable questions, what do you want to be your legacy? And to me, that's ultimately then going in the reverse
Yes.
direction. Okay, so then how do we live today? And what is that life mission statement? Because then you take that statement and you
Right.
assess with that wheel of life and be like, okay, according to this statement, how would I rate my fulfillment in these 6 areas? So here you go, guys. I wrote out my own life mission statement. I've never
Ooh.
done it before. I did this in 5 minutes. So it's not pretty, but right, it just needs to get done. So
But
those
we
of
got
you
to keep it
listening,
simple, right? You got to
keep it
keep it
simple.
simple.
Yeah. Which
Yeah.
mine is like 3, 4 lines. So I don't know how simple I kept it, but I'm a very
That's,
wordy person.
I want to hear this, Anna. I'm so excited that
Okay, here we go.
I'm getting this live right now. Let's go.
Yes, love it. Yeah, as are everyone listening. So here we go. Here's my messy mission statement. But my mission is to glorify God by empowering others to rise with more confidence, energy, and joy by equipping them to still fear and strengthen faith through gratitude for our divine worth as a man or woman created in the image of God and the transforming power of Jesus Christ.
Wow.
Wordy, maybe not super simple, but I did that in like 5 minutes. And so, for
Mhm.
those of you listening, my challenge for you, as Andrew challenged us in the book, is to just quick jot down, what do you want to be said about you? And then how do you write that into a mission statement? And then let's dive a little bit more into that wheel of life. So I'm going to go to
Yeah.
page 51. I did this too,
Wonderful.
this
And
exercise.
I want to give an
Yeah,
example.
please.
You shared one that was, as you said, wordy. I don't know. It's yours. I'm not going to judge it. But if you were to ask my father, who's in his 75th year of life, and he has 30 grandkids, and he is traveling to states and watching games and
Yeah.
helping, like, if you were to ask my dad what his mission in life is, it would be this simple: to serve everyone, starting with my own family. Like, that's his mission in life.
Mhm.
He believes that he has this incredible stewardship to serve others, and his family's first. And he says it all the time: family first, family forever. So his mission in life is to serve everyone, starting with his own family. So it could be as simple as that, or it could be as deep and complex and wordy as Anna's.
Yeah. And I will give this for my own life. The one thing I have found really helpful with clarity, this is not to negate what you just said, because you're
Yeah,
absolutely right. You just need to start somewhere, and maybe it is that
exactly.
simple.
Yeah.
I do find it helpful sometimes to give that by, that
Hmm.
extra word that says, okay, here's by. And like for your dad, it might be by creating the time to invest in
Yes.
my grandchildren by traveling around the country to be at their games
Yeah.
or to take them out, which you said, and he would probably say if
Hmm.
I asked him to put the by. But for those of you wondering, like a template,
Yep.
that's such a beautiful example. It could be as simple as I want to serve my family. Okay, and then my challenge for you is by, and then if you want to take it to the next, it's with, because you're saying by doing what with what tools?
Hmm.
With what tools are you going to use? So for me, it's God and Jesus
That's right.
because I desperately need something way outside of myself. But it can be whatever. It could be by traveling around the country to be at my kids' games with the free time that I have because I'm retired. Fill in the blank.
Yep.
But that mission statement is awesome challenge. So write it down, pause us, write it down right now, text it to yourself, because then we need to look at the wheel of life. These are
Hmm.
these 6 areas that he just mentioned. So tell us the six
Yeah.
areas in the wheel of life again.
So the first would be career. The second is relationship, significant other. If you're in a marriage, we can call it marriage, right? The third is family. And family is really twofold: the family you came from, and then if you've created
Mm,
a family, you have that one as well. And
mm,
then we have physical fitness and nutrition, which is your health when it comes to your body, and then
mhm.
personal growth and development. And then the last area is spirituality.
Yeah, and I love this. So what he did, he showed it to you as well.
Mhm.
But it's basically for those of you watching on YouTube, so you can give a little, you see my circles.
Yeah.
Um, but then, what I love about it is you take that mission statement. So I wrote down my mission statement, and then based on that clarity, rate yourself from 1 to 10. So for me, I fell into like 8 to 10 on 5 of them.
Hmm.
And then the relationship, ironically, with significant other is the one that I rated at like a 6, 7.
Right.
And so I've been very open. My husband and I are in marriage counseling. We started in the summer. And my listeners have heard me say this, like, I firmly believe we need to change the narrative around therapy. Instead of being an intervention, it needs to be prevention.
Hmm.
Instead of waiting until, life has
Yeah.
blown up and really bad things have happened to get it, like, let's intervene earlier so we're not just surviving, but we're thriving. And so that's what we're
Yes.
doing. Um, and, so it was applicable because then what I love that you said is pick one area.
Hmm.
You pick one of them, and then that is what you are going to focus in on. And you talk about these breakthrough sessions. So that's what I wrote down. I said my relationship with Zach, her
Yeah.
significant other. Um, and then you have these breakthrough sessions with your clients where you're ultimately going to focus on that one area. So you've sort of
Right.
taken them through this journey. And then the expertise that I really want to hone in on here is this concept of helping once you have narrowed these things down to help break through the limiting beliefs with something called neuro-linguistic programming
Yes.
to ultimately help create more fulfillment
Hmm.
in that area of life. There's so much to unpack there because I love it. It's specific, it's one area. Notice he didn't say we're going to like do all
Yeah.
six at one time.
Yep.
It's one area. So, talk to us about neuro-linguistic programming and just practically what that looks like and
Sure.
how it's
So
helpful.
yeah, we break it down to the acronym NLP. And NLP became famous when Tony Robbins started helping Andre Agassi decades ago.
Oh, that's
And
hilarious. I did not
right,
know that.
so yeah, he was the first one that became a practitioner of NLP that really started doing massive transformation in people's lives.
Andre Agassi was a professional tennis player, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And he
Yes.
struggled with
Okay.
some terrible drug addiction. And so
Mm,
whether it's Andre Agassi from the late 80s and 90s into Conor McGregor of the 2020s, like, those are the people that he can help, the ones that are the most hurting. So neuro is your brain. Linguistics is not just language, but linguistics is how we make meaning of the world. So how does your brain create meaning? And how does that meaning then program you to do the things you do and not do the things you don't do? That's
hmm
neurolinguistic programming. If we can understand the meaning that you've made about yourself and the world and how that relates to why you do and don't do certain things, then we can actually just follow that thread all the way back to the beginning and create new meaning because your brain has neuroplasticity. Your neurons, your brain, your belief systems can change, and it doesn't take years and years and years of counseling and therapy. We can do it immediately, just like we can wipe the hard drive on your device.
hmm And, I thought a really concise, you said this for somebody who heard all that and was like, that just went right over my head. You said it
Sure.
very clearly, but it is very basically, from what I understand, neuro-linguistic programming is ultimately studying the way our thoughts
Yeah,
affect our behavior
exactly.
and changing the narrative that thoughts and emotions are out of our control,
Hmm.
but are in fact within our control. Would you say
That's
that's
right.
a fairly accurate?
That's extremely accurate, Anna. I need to hire you to do copy for my business and my brand. That was beautiful.
This is years of being an emergency medicine practitioner where I'm having to translate complex understanding for patients.
Yeah.
Just tell it to me simple. Well, so
NLP is, well, let me
yeah.
give you one other simple definition. NLP is a pattern interrupt. How do we
Mm,
interrupt the pattern so we can create a new one? And that takes
mm,
place, we do it in the brain. It's very simple.
mm. Well, and what's so interesting, it's, when I was preparing for this interview, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm already using this concept and I didn't even realize it.
Hmm.
So with our youngest daughter, God is going to use her in big ways. She's very defiant. She is like equal parts stubborn as she is sweet in
Yeah.
just really extreme measures.
Right.
And um, to the point where she's like so stubborn that she will keep going even at her own expense. Like she knows the consequences are going to be severe and it's like she just can't stop herself.
Mm.
And then when the consequences happen, like she throws her favorite toy and breaks it in anger, literally just happened this morning. Um, she starts formulating the sense that, oh, I'm so sad because I'm such a bad girl.
Mm.
And
Right.
so the response on my end is always, you're not a bad girl. You are a lovely, amazing little girl who is loved, made in the image of God, but sometimes you make bad choices. And trying to help her embrace this concept that choices are in fact within her power, and that is a superpower, and she's strong. But it's funny because as I was preparing for this, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's
Yeah,
neuro-linguistic programming.
that's right. I'm doing it.
I don't understand what I'm doing, but I'm doing it because it makes sense to me that we need to change the narrative. But, she's obviously very young, but I'm thinking, how do you, for the adult who perhaps didn't have anyone in their life helping them at a young age to start changing that narrative or communicating with them, like, it gives me a lot of grace and compassion for people who, I just think of my daughter, like, what if she had nobody
Right.
to speak into her life, which so many people don't. And so that is the programming that has
Mhm.
been there for 2, 3, 4 decades.
Yeah.
Where would you start with them? Like, how do you even start communicating with them to get that process, like the pattern interrupt? Where do you start? What's that process look like?
Well, we do it in the very first hour of a 4 to 5 hour breakthrough session. And it's very common that someone will say, I just learned more about myself in the first hour of our
Mm,
working together than I did. No joke. One woman said in 21 years of therapy with the same
mm,
professional. And she said, I'm so grateful she retired and so referred me to you. So it starts very quickly. And all I have to do is ask powerful questions that identify what your patterns are. Not only patterns of behavior, but what are you making that behavior mean about you? Your daughter, as much as you work on this, there will come a day when she's between
yes.
the ages of 19 and 25, Anna, where she will be ready to completely change that narrative. And
Mm,
I remember when I figured this out, I asked my coach who had been practicing this form of, release work of mental and emotional baggage. He'd been doing it already for 18 years. And I said to him, I feel like I'm screwing up my kids because I have seven.
mm,
And he
mm.
said, Andrew, whether you think you are or aren't, you are, and it's not your fault. It's
Yes,
happening.
that's
It's
right.
happening.
Amen.
It's
Yes,
happening
amen.
unconsciously.
Right.
And so
Because we're imperfect, right? There's
we
that
are.
humility coming in, like, let's own it, you guys. Just own it.
Well, not only are we imperfect, but I mean, we're mortal and we're
Right.
susceptible to all things
That's
that
right.
mortality brings. And our goal
Right.
is to bring conscious awareness and bring our highest and best spirit self, that God within us, like to bring that out. And what we'll do with your daughter someday, or what I would do with an adult, is let's get extreme clarity on what you're believing to be true about yourself because
Mhm.
of these behaviors. And when they're real and they actually say the words, I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, I'm not enough, it almost always brings them, male or female, to tears. And for them to just fully accept that that's what's been running their programming for so long,
Mhm. Mhm.
it's almost relieving to finally know. It's like, oh, it's not just that I have a headache. There is a tumor in my brain. Okay, now we can do something about it. So that's where we start.
Mhm. Mhm. And then what is when you kind of dig into that emotional
Mhm.
release in a sense, what are some of the practical tools that you give people in their day-to-day lives to start interrupting that pattern? I love that phrase.
Sure. Well, these are the 6 focusing questions. And I have my clients put this as the background on their phone, the
Mm,
screensaver on their everywhere that they can possibly look where they're on their devices. I have them put these 6 focusing questions. And when we find ourselves in a mental or emotional hijacking, meaning, well, I can't stop this thought process, or I can't get out of these
mhm,
emotions that I'm in, this tool, these 6 questions, are simple to break that. And the first question is this. And I like to tell my clients, imagine that shoulder angel Andrew is sitting on your shoulder. And in this moment, I whisper in your ear, hey, Anna, what are you focusing on right now? Number two, what are you making it mean? And number three, what are you doing about it? So let's pretend like you didn't have an awesome interaction with your daughter this morning and you lost it. Okay.
Mm.
And you're feeling just awful. And you pick up the phone and you say, Andrew, help me. And I say, okay, what are you focusing on? I'm focusing on her behavior and the fact that she's throwing this huge fit and breaking this toy. Okay, Anna, what are you making it mean? That I'm failing. Like if we get down to it,
Mhm.
I'm failing as a
Mhm.
parent, and someday
Absolutely.
she's going to be in prison.
Yeah.
And then
Yes.
I say, what are you
Yes.
doing about it? I'm
Yes.
trying to stop it with the only way I
Yeah.
know how, and that is matching her emotions with my own to try to
Yeah.
interrupt this pattern. Okay, those are the first three questions. What are you focusing on? What are you making it mean? Like really deep, deep down. And number three, what are you doing about it? Those
Mhm.
first three questions really help to pause that behavior and bring awareness. Because when we see
Mhm.
ourselves doing something, most of the time we're like, man, that's really stupid. Like, what am I doing? And then
Yes.
the next three questions empower something different by saying,
Mm.
okay, Anna, what do you want to focus on instead? What do you want to make this whole thing mean
Mhm.
about her and you? And what do you want to do about it? And if we
Mm.
slow those down and back them up, and you might say, what do I want to focus on? I want to focus on that this is a very myopic, a very small moment in the grand scheme of things. What do I want to
Mhm.
make it mean? That this is age appropriate behavior. And what do we want to do about it? I want to meet her need of love and attention in this moment, and making her feel like she belongs to this family rather than ostracizing her by shaming her in her bedroom by
Mhm.
herself.
Mhm.
So those are the six focusing questions. What are you focusing on? What are you making it mean? What are you doing about it? What would you like to focus on instead? What would you like to make this whole thing mean? And what do you want to
Mhm.
do about it?
Mhm. I love that. And I think it's applicable for, yeah, parenting, such a great application for that. And
Right.
then in our own lives, I'm thinking of the woman that I have worked with and spoken with many times who is, and that woman, you might be listening right now, you might say, oh, yeah, that's me. Like
Yeah.
the woman who pretty much as soon as there is conflict or something is outside of your control
Hmm.
or our control, the narrative starts to quickly become um, about exactly what you're saying. This idea of, okay, so when I'm feeling anxious, when I'm feeling this sense of, my heart rate is rising, I'm overwhelmed, I feel out of control or I feel afraid. I feel
Right.
like this is also a great opportunity to change that narrative because it's like what you just said. So often when we feel those physiological responses to the mental and emotional narrative,
Yeah.
it's like capturing that, like what you're saying. So I guess I'm challenging, women, if this is you listening, because this is the woman that I've worked with a lot. It's that sense of when you start to feel that anxiety, but you're not sure why. It might just be coming out of nowhere and you're not quite sure where it's coming from or you're afraid. Maybe it's a pinpoint, you know exactly why, maybe you don't. I
Mhm.
think this is such a valuable tool. Like you stop and you say, "Okay, what am I actually focusing on?" and take a moment to say, "What is uppermost on my mind?" Because maybe that's actually what's causing the anxiety
Mhm.
or the fear. And then what you just said, so what am I focusing on or what's
Yep.
uppermost on
And
my mind? And then the
yep. And
second
and
one
that
is
that that really what it is, it's you're identifying the trigger. What is it
yes, yes,
triggering this? And number two,
yes,
we're getting to the belief system. What am I making it mean? We are meaning
yes, yes,
making
yes,
machines as humans. We give meaning
yes,
to things that it's not even true or real. It's just ridiculous, most of the
yes.
meaning we make. So it's identifying the meaning. What am I making this mean? What are the beliefs that I hold around this trigger, this
Yeah.
whatever?
Which is so often, "I'm not enough," or "I'm failing." I mean, that has to be the number one response in my experience working with
Yeah,
people, that is really at the heart of it. I'm not doing enough. I'm
right.
not hustling hard enough.
Exactly.
I am not ultimately in and of myself enough.
That's right. And having done to this date 251 of these
Mm,
breakthrough sessions, which are 4 to
mm,
5 hours in the last 5 years, I will tell you that the two things that I get the most is either around worthiness, being enough,
mm,
or
mm,
around another form of it is lovability. I'm not lovable. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not, I can't. And again, they always come back to worth, whether it's being
Yeah.
enough, good enough,
Mm-hmm.
or lovable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The question, am I enough and am I worthy of loving and being loved in
That's right.
return? Yeah, that's I think at the heart of for sure. And then the third one, so again, I'm speaking to that woman. The third one, so what do I believe about that
Yeah.
focus?
What are you making it
And then
mean?
the
And
third,
what are you doing? What are you doing in this
yeah,
moment?
what
What
are
are
you
you
doing?
doing about it?
Yes. Yes. I'm eating more, or I'm exercising more, or I'm laying on the couch more, or
Right.
I am doing more. I think this is a big one in our society. And women, you can chime in here, leave us a comment on Apple or wherever you listen to your podcast, or on YouTube and let Andrew and I know. I think this is an interesting one to explore because you might not even realize how these responses play out because when you actually pause and you say, okay, yeah, what am I focused on? What do I believe then about myself in that focus? And then three, what am I doing? I think it really connects the dots for people because they might not even realize, oh, I clean my house because I feel like if it's clean enough, then I'm put back together. Or I get busier.
Hmm.
I always say busy is our self-medication for reality. It's like we just get busier. I don't know. Like I love that concept of connecting these dots. So that's my challenge to you guys listening is to take Andrew's these steps and start to connect just those first three. You
Yeah.
might realize that things that you tend to do are actually in response to an unhealthy pattern that
That's
we
right.
need to
It's
interrupt.
what it's concealer. And I just learned
Mm,
this. Like my wife doesn't wear a lot of makeup, so it was my daughter, my 15-year-old daughter that was teaching
yeah.
me like, is that the word? Do I have that right? Is it called concealer?
You were also asking somebody, believe it or not, who has had a very recent makeup journey. So I
Okay,
think
so
I don't even think I use concealer, but I think concealer is like a thicker form of foundation that
yes.
specifically conceals stuff, and then it's like the foundation goes over.
Okay, great. So I want you to imagine, okay? Imagine that we, and maybe you do or I do, I don't know, but we or someone listening, they have
Hmm.
a zit or a pimple, and
Hmm.
we're trying to conceal it, right? And
Yes.
we put something on, and it's ironic because in so doing, we close the pore, and we're not
Hmm.
allowing it to breathe and get what it needs, which is oxygen and the healing process, and the busyness of the
Hmm.
modern day mom or the working woman, the
Hmm.
busyness of being more involved and more dedicated in pursuing things becomes a layer upon layer upon layer, and it actually builds that pressure. And I love the word
Yes.
breakthrough because what we do is we take it all off, and
Hmm.
whatever it is that they've been feeling and thinking about themselves, we're able to release it back into the universe, like literally into the nothingness from whence it was
Hmm.
created. And we don't have
Hmm.
to conceal, we don't have to hide, we don't have to pretend. We don't have to feel like an imposter anymore. Wearing our badges of busyness and our, our titles of achievement
Yeah.
as who we are defined by.
Yeah. And I think the challenge for us, this has been a challenge for both my husband and I, as we've in marriage counseling, especially really peeled back some of these layers and been like, oh, busyness is definitely one of our Achilles heels. We're both high achievers, for good or for bad. And so I think one of the challenges too is in that busyness, it might be good stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe you're like volunteering at church more, or
Right.
you sign up to bring more meals. Is it truly out of an overflow of joy and gratitude and abundance, or is it because you actually don't feel like you're enough? And so you are trying to, in fact, fill yourself up with that sense of abundance.
A wise man once said, a distraction does not have to be evil to be effective.
Amen
Love
to that.
that. It
Yes.
can be something that is good that we are, giving up, or that we need to give up to do something that's great, or something that's great that we need to give up to do something. So we talked about good, from good to great, to do something that's exceptional, that's in our
Yeah.
zone of genius. And most
Yep.
of us are playing small. We're playing not to lose by staying in these comfort zones of good and great when we're missing out on that zone of genius, that excellence within us.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. Strength of the oak, strength of the willow, how to find courage and compassion in a turbulent world. Andrew, where can people learn more about you, get your book. You guys, the link is going to obviously be in the show notes.
Right.
It'll be in the YouTube description as well. But where can people find you and follow you?
Well, Amazon is the easiest way. If you want me to read the book to you, you can find it on Audible. If you're a Kindle reader,
There you go. He
physical
will read it to you.
copy. Yeah, there we
Yep.
go. I'll be the voice in your head, as some of my clients have said.
Literally, the little Andrew angel will
That's
be on
right.
your shoulder in your ear.
There you go. So Amazon, and then I'm on social media. You can find me at Andrew L. Anderson. Uh, and then, yeah, that's the easiest way. And if we're going to leave today without doing something, then I will have felt like we have failed. And Stephen Covey said that learning is changed behavior. And as one of my mentors, I have taken that into my classroom and to every call that I do with a client. And if there's just one behavior that I could ask you to change today, it would be that you put down your device, like stop the recording right after this statement, and you go serve someone. If you
Mm,
can get outside yourself, even if you're struggling to identify your life mission, as Anna
hmm
challenged you to do earlier, if you can just get outside yourself and serve someone, you will find that calling and that mission. And losing ourselves, Jesus said, is how we find ourselves. So I challenge each of you to go serve someone today. And if you would like to spend time with me, I'm going to offer 3 uh, coaching calls complimentary to the first 3 people that reach out. And
mm.
you can do so at 30 minutes, 30 minutes, .andrewlanderson.com.
And you better run because I might take it and then my husband might take the second one. I might
Okay,
take the
we'll
third. I'm
open
just
it. If
kidding.
it's you and your husband, we'll open it to 5, but we'll do 3 spots. I'm
I'm
happy
just kidding.
to serve
We
you.
will happily give it to listeners. That's a very generous offer, you guys. I would run, not walk to that offer. There's just so many amazing principles. And his website is andrewanderson.com. Is that right?
There's an L in there. You got to remember
There's an
the
L
L.
in
The L
there.
is a
My
tribute to my
copy and
mother.
paste dropped it.
My mother's maiden name is Lee, and she gave me her maiden name. So Andrew L stands for
Oh,
Lee. So I have my dad and my mom's last names in there. So
that is sweet.
andrewlanderson.com.
AndrewLAnderson.com. You definitely want to click on that link and for sure take advantage of that 30-minute. This episode will likely be produced in February. So if you are listening and you are happening to listen on the day that it goes live, get it, give him a call, get that link. And Andrew, it's such an honor to have you. And I just pray God's blessing over your heart, your home, and all the amazing lives that God is touching through you.
Thank you, Anna. God bless you as well.
Thank you for watching the Imperfectly Empowered podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the channel by clicking below. And if you missed our last video, then be sure to check it out right here. We'll see you next time on the podcast. Your story matters and you are loved.